Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you a few simple techniques to help with the creation of your very own terrifying first-person horror game. First I'll be covering how to make your player character move, and how to build your environment. Then, in the second half of the video, I'll be showing you how to build a flashlight and some spooky jump scares. One quick note before we get started, in GBG there's always multiple ways to achieve your aim, so although I'll be showing you a selection of specific processes here, if any one of them doesn't meet the needs of your project, then don't be afraid to experiment and modify the process accordingly. On top of that, I've simplified this process as much as possible for this tutorial, so GBG experts may spot some shortcuts that they could take. Oh, and the creation codes for all the games highlighted in the intro and the outro of this video are available in the description. Okay, let's get started. First we'll create our player character. For this example, I'll be using a UFO as the basis for our character movement. The UFO is incredibly useful for setting up a simple player character in 3D space, and can be found under Objects, Characters, and UFO. Let's also drag our UFO to be in line with the floor plane. Next, let's give our little UFO some controls. Go to Input, Stick Movement, Left Stick, and pick Up Down. This is how we'll navigate our UFO through 3D space. Let's also get a right stick nodon found in Input, Right Stick, Left Right. Connect the left stick nodon to the forward backward port on the UFO. Let's leave the left right stick disconnected for now and press play. Neat, we have movement, but we're still in third person. Let's go back to the program screen and set up our first person camera. Go to Objects, Game Screen, Camera, and choose Camera. Connect the upper port of the UFO to the lower port of the camera nodon. Now let's make use of the right stick nodon by connecting it up to the horizontal input of the camera. Great! Before we head back to the game screen though, we have one setting on the UFO to change. Let's open up the UFO settings and disable visible. This will prevent the camera from clipping into the UFO as we move around. Let's also adjust the UFO's movement speed by reducing the horizontal speed setting to 0.8. When you've done, exit out of the UFO settings and tap play. With the left stick we can walk forwards and backwards, and with the right stick we can look left and right. Nice! We're well on our way to creating our first person game. If you're feeling adventurous, you could experiment with adding additional inputs to both the UFO nodon and the camera nodon for a greater range of movement, such as strafing and free look. But for this tutorial, I'll be keeping it simple. Now we have our player character, but they have nowhere to go. So let's fix that. Go to Objects, Simple Objects, and select Box. This will be one of our walls, so let's scale it up a bit, making sure it's taller than our player character. Seeing as we're building a game with a character who navigates through 3D space, we'll also need to adjust the length, or width, of our wall. Let's tap this widget in the top right corner of the screen and get a more suitable vantage point. Tapping this will flip our program screen view from looking down the Z-axis, like in a 2D Mario game for example, to looking along the Y-axis, like we're a bird looking down on the scene from above. So now let's stretch out our walls and go into the settings for the object. Once open, turn off Destructible, Destructive, and Movable. Once you've done that, you can close the settings screen. We'll need 4 walls to make a room, so let's get copying. Select the object nodon, tap Copy, and drag it to the other side of our player. Now let's copy that and resize it so it's wide enough to meet the first wall without any gaps. We're going to copy this one more time and move it into position to act as our final wall. Don't worry if it's not perfect, you'll have as long as you need to tweak it later. Let's head back to the game screen. Looking great, but it's not very scary. One powerful tool at our disposal is the World nodon. Back in Programming, select Objects and World. This is a very special nodon that allows us to alter our environment, including the time of day and the appearance of blocks. In the World nodon settings, select World Lighting and change the time to night. Back in the game screen, we can see that it creates a far moodier atmosphere than before, but it's looking a little bland. So let's head back into the programming screen to spice things up a bit. Tap on the World nodon and head into the settings. I've decided for this tutorial that I'd like to make a hedge maze, so in world appearance I'm going to pick grass as my floor or ground plane, but you can pick whichever option you like the look of most. We can also theme our walls. This could be done by selecting each wall and changing the color within its settings, but I prefer to use the texture nodon, which can be found in Objects, Special Objects, Texture. Plop that down and open up the texture settings. From here you can draw anything you'd like to appear on your walls. Once your texture is ready, you can connect it up to all the applicable object nodon's upper port connections. From here, you could add to or reconfigure your map as much as you'd like. I've added a few more walls to expand my maze. Let's check it out. Next, we'll look at how to make a working flashlight, and then we'll be upping the fear factor with some spooky jump scares. Let's get started with the flashlight, which I'll be referring to as a torch going forward. We're going to need 3 components for this step, so in the programming screen, go to Objects, Simple Objects, and pick Box. Then, in Input, pick Constant. And lastly, in Objects, go to Special Objects, Effects, and pick Light. Let's connect these up now, and I'll explain how each component functions. Connect up the constant nodon to the trigger port on the effect nodon. This sends a signal that ensures the light is on at all times. Next, from the upper port of the object nodon to the lower port of the effects nodon. This ties the light source to the object. And finally, connect the upper port of the UFO to the object nodon. This ties the object containing the light source to our player character. We still have a couple of settings to change before we can test out our torch. So let's first go into the settings of our recently created box and disable visible, solid, destructible, and destructive. Let's also change the material to 0 gravity. Additionally, let's set the connection point to center, so the light will emanate from the center of our player. Once that's done, you can close the object settings screen and open the settings for our effect nodon. Here, disable visible and change the effect timing to while not 0. This change will ensure the light stays on rather than just blinking on when it first receives an input. Next, change effect location to world. Once that's done, exit out of these settings. Increasing the size of the effect nodon will define how big the volume of the light is. So let's increase the size and click play. Woohoo, looking good! Now let's set up a simple jump scare. While not everyone is a fan of jump scares, the steps we'll cover here are useful for all kinds of interactions. On the programming screen, go to Objects, Sensor, and Touch Sensor. The touch sensor is a kind of trigger volume. In this instance, we'll be using this to output a signal when our player touches it. I'd like my jump scare to trigger when the player rounds the final corner of the maze, so let's scale up the touch sensor so that it's wide enough to cover the full width of the path. Next, let's go to Objects, Special Objects, and choose Texture. Go to the settings of the texture nodon and draw your ghastly ghoul or creepy critter. Once that's done, you can close out of the texture settings. Now we'll need to link up the output port of the touch sensor to the visible port of the texture. There are a couple of options we'll need to change in the settings of the touch sensor, so let's open that up. Once there, uncheck visible and change check what to UFO only. This way, only our player will trigger the sprite's appearance. Before I forget, we should also make sure the sprite is located somewhere the player will be able to see. Additionally, let's press the widget in the top right corner to flip back to looking along the Z-axis while we make sure the sprite and trigger volume are at a sensible height in relation to the rest of the world. Remember that if at any time you're having trouble selecting small objects, don't forget that you can connect up a USB mouse to your Switch for more precision in the programming screen. Now we're all set, let's head to the game screen. Boo! Delightfully devilish. But I think there are two more quick things we could add to really improve the effect. Back on the programming screen, select Output, Play Sound, and choose Play SFX. Let's also grab a Play Background Music nodon found in Output. Let's connect up the touch sensor to the play input of the sound effect nodon, and then we can open up the settings to pick an appropriate sound effect to play when we trigger the jump scare. I'm going to pick Laughter, Evil, but you can choose whichever works best for you. Heading out of the settings screen, let's go to Input and choose Constant. Hook this up to the background music nodon and head into the settings. Here we can select our BGM, or background music. I'm going to change the theme to ambient and disable everything except for the option called horror. Last but not least, let's go to Outputs, Retry End Swap, and pick Retry. This can be used to automatically restart the game when an input is sent in its direction. For this example, let's put a timer between this nodon and our touch sensor. This will mean that only a few seconds after we trigger the jump scare will the game actually restart. To do this, we'll need a timer, which is found in middle. Once we have our timer, let's go into settings and adjust the output for how many settings option to 2. Now you can close the settings and drag a connection out from the touch sensor to the input of the timer, and from the output of the timer to the input of the retry nodon. Let's press play one last time to try out our creation. We did it! With these techniques under your belt, you'll be able to develop your own heart-pounding first-person horror games until you're blue in the face. Interestingly, I noticed a mysterious game titled The Frog: Paths of Fear had appeared on my creation list all by itself while I was working on this video. I guess I should release the creation code for the demo in a little while, but for now, here's a quick teaser. It appears Paths of Fear is based on Deep Space Adventures, a long-running original series produced right here on this channel. There's a link to the latest episodes in the description if you'd like to learn more about this mysterious character, simply known as the Frog. And finally, before I go, I stream GBG almost every day here on YouTube, so why not subscribe to be notified once I go live? We also have a Discord now. It's full of friendly and super creative builders who are always ready to talk all things GBG. The link to that is in the description below. See you next time. Bye bye!